Welcome to another Bushido-kai book report. When I was in my late 20s, I was teaching aiki-ju-jutsu in a little dojo in Framingham, Massachusetts, while I was studying Shotokan karate in Newton, Massachusetts, about a half hour away. I was also teaching judo in Framingham dojo. But in my aiki-ju-jutsu class, I found that a lot of the students would sincerely try to learn the techniques, but would not understand how the technique worked. So they would memorize the form of the technique, much as you would memorize the form of a kata in karate. So I began talking about simple principles that they could think about rather than thinking about exact form. So I developed 5 principles that morphed into 10 principles. Later on, in my 30s, I wrote an article for a now defunct magazine called Self-Defense World. And it was a magazine by martial artists for martial artists. So I happened to read an article in that magazine by a guy named Don Ager, who had inherited an aiki-ju-jutsu art. And when I saw his illustrations, I said, those are techniques like I do. So I wrote him. And we ended up corresponding a little bit and talking on the phone. I tried to go to see him when I went out to LA and was unable to because he was on a shoot. He worked for a motion picture company as a makeup artist. And when I got back, I continued the phone conversations, however, only to discover that we both taught by principles. Now, he was my senior by far, and had been doing this much longer. Fast forward, I, at some point, decided it would be wise to invite him out to my new dojo and have a seminar in which he could show his aiki-ju-jutsu system. And then later, still another dojo, time goes by, dojos change, we did a set of videos together called Principles of Aiki. Then I began thinking, why do we not teach other arts, especially karate, by principles? So I was then teaching, I had stopped teaching judo. There wasn't a lot of call for it. But I was teaching aiki-ju-jutsu, karate, and my own in-house art called Seiken Buddha. And I decided to develop principles, some of which were based on Don Ager's Principles of Aiki. By the way, we have the original videotape of the Principles of Aiki and one of Don Ager teaching some of my oldest videos. And some of the most popular. Later, I started fleshing these out and trying to apply them to karate, and made a series of 3 videos called Principles of Advanced Budo. Now, this book, you can say comes from the videos, but the video actually came from the book. What I try to do here is talk about very simple topics. When we label a principle, we label with one word. Now, that doesn't tell you a lot about the principle. The principle has to be fleshed out. For example, alignment, allowing, attack detail, attitude, avoid conflict, conform, connection, context, continuity, control the circle, control vision, hidden in the open. There is a series of principles that the words of which are just mnemonic devices to get people to connect. Oh yeah, I remember hearing that in class when sensei said, do this, do that. So I worked on a book of a couple of 100 pages to flesh those things out, to make what could be a very complicated subject as simple as possible and cover the material that people needed to know to understand what makes their Budo work. I'm forever indebted to Don Ajay for extending my knowledge of principles. I went off on my own and did a lot of work myself, of course, but he was very much an encouragement and an example. The idea on this is to make it so that you have a set number of fundamentals you can adhere to rather than an infinite list of techniques. The Principles of Advanced Budo was the inspiration for me to do master classes decades later, where I did certain other principles, some of these, some others, and then later still master classes in which I did what's called mini principles. And there is a whole series of videos on those. So people have told me that this has allowed them to understand their Budo and control what they do and correct what they do much more easily than correcting a technique, because so many techniques use a similar principle and so many techniques use multiple principles that memorizing technique falls short of fully understanding how it works. Hope you enjoy it. Principles of Advanced Budo. Thank you.